Now, the UN General Assembly not just represents a stage for global diplomacy, but for tackling climate change. World leaders, including President Moon Jae-in, took part in a highly anticipated meeting Monday, just hours ago, actually, to discuss ways to work towards a greener world. U.S. President Donald Trump also made a surprise but a brief stop to hear from a couple of other world leaders. Our Yoon Jung-min reports.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called on world leaders Monday for concrete and realistic plans to raise their contributions toward achieving net zero emissions by 2050. His remarks came at the UN Climate Action Summit 2019 in New York, where leaders from governments, business, and civil activist groups gathered to tackle the issue of climate change.
Nature is angry, and we fool ourselves if we think we can fool nature. Because nature always strikes back, and around the world, nature is striking back with fury.
Praising the 2015 Paris Agreement to combat global warming, Guterres called for no new coal plants to be built after 2020 and pressed for a phase-out of fossil fuel subsidies, aiming for carbon neutrality by 2050. While some countries have made a lot of progress, others are moving too slowly, as he pointed out. U.S. President Donald Trump, who has scrapped regulations aimed at combating climate change, stopped by with Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. There was no remarks from Trump, but he left after listening to remarks by German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In a video message, Pope Francis called for the need to ramp up efforts to mitigate the impact of climate change and face what he described as one of the most serious and worrying phenomena of our time. Other leaders, including Merkel, promised to expand their country's contribution to combat climate change. Among them was South Korean President Moon Jae-in, who has made 3 pledges to combat the issue.
첫째, 한국형 지속가능 발전 목표 수립을 비롯하여 지속가능한 저탄소 경제로 조기에 전환하기 위해 다양한 방안을 모색해 나가겠습니다.
President Moon promised South Korea will expand its role to tackle climate change, such as doubling its contribution to the Green Climate Fund and hosting a P4G summit in South Korea. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.